Welcome back to Untethering Shame, the podcast all about cultivating shame resilience and radical acceptance. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and today we're diving into a topic that affects so many of us, shame and our bodies. Whether it's about weight, shape, or appearance, the pressures we feel to make our bodies look a certain way or present or appear a certain way can be overwhelming. Ever since I can remember, the scale was like a judge. The number told me how I got to feel for the day. The number signified good or bad. As I got older, the scale gained more power and numbers became a fixation. From the size clothes I wore, the number of calories I ate, and all coming back to the number on the scale, I had lost touch with my body. It was no longer a part of me, but something to be scrutinized, shamed, judged, and constantly managed. Now, I'm not alone in this. And regardless of your gender identity or expression, age, or other identities, I know you've struggled too. How? Because you have a body. You live in today's world, and that means you grew up hearing your own tailored messages about judgment on how your body should look and what to do to make up for any quote-unquote deficiencies in getting there. Now, our guest today is someone who has dedicated her life to helping others navigate these pressures with grace and confidence. Bri Wilkerson is a holistic health coach, essential oils fanatic, fitness instructor, podcast host, wife and mama, and matcha tea lover. She specializes in helping busy moms prioritize their health and self-care so they can feel healthy, strong, and confident no matter what season of motherhood they're in. Bri also empowers moms to use natural solutions like essential oils to care for their health, home, and family. Now, while Bri and I can only speak to our experiences and expertise, I want you to remember this pain is universal, and the right to love and accept our bodies is something we all deserve. All right, so let's dive in, let's bring Bri in, and let's get into it.
Well, oh man, that intro is great. I feel like that's all we need for the podcast. You're so beautiful.
And cut, right?
Done.
Yeah,
See you guys.
and here we go. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm still thinking about the first time that we met when we were like pre-chatting for your podcast, and it was like 5 a.m. my time. I'm still new mom stages, going through like sleep transitions. I looked like a hot mess. I felt like a hot mess. Let's not even focus on how I looked because that's my shame of like I presented a certain way, but I felt like I looked. And I just remember getting on the call with you and I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. I'd had some like shitty podcast interviews with people where I just didn't vibe. And within like 4 seconds, I was like, oh, this is what taking a breath feels like, and having safety and a fresh conversation with somebody that like my energy just came back online in such a different way. And so I don't remember when that was, a couple years ago now.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Mm-hmm.
So I just feel so grateful that now I get to have you here on my podcast, because that wasn't even a thing back then. And now you're here.
I remember
and we
you
get
talking
to do this.
about it, how you wanted to launch it, and we just kept trying to get me on, and it never happened. But now we're here. But yeah.
Okay. So I'm pumped. I love to start every episode doing just a one-word check-in, just to kind of get a feel for where we're at for the day. So I'm curious if you could describe how you're feeling either about this topic or just about your day in general. What's one word you would use to describe it right now?
Yeah. Oh man, this is hard. Many great words. I think I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about this because it's interesting. It feels like as I do my own work, constantly doing my own work around shame, it never stops. I just realized that there are certain areas and certain things about it that I wasn't ready to really dive deeper into, and was kind of shifting. Anyways, so over the last couple months, I've been dealing with my own so it's not just in this area I'm feeling shame. It's like in all of these. It's just, it moves. If you don't deal with the thing of shame, it just moves to another area. So I'm just ready to talk about this and not say that I'm an expert, but just like I've wrestled, like hardcore wrestled with a lot of this stuff. And I'm not ashamed to talk about shame because I think that's the problem. We are. So anyways, just ready.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, two things where I can't remember I think it was on Instagram, but it was basically like this message that was saying, I think I've gone too far in the work. Like I've got no one left. Everyone's gone. Everything is terrible. Because the more that you unpack, the more you realize, fuck, like this relationship is codependent. This relationship is unhealthy. Gosh, that person is probably a narcissist. I've got shame here. I can't touch this. Do I even like Pop-Tarts? Like I think about this Gilmore Girls episode where she's like, I don't know who I am. And I think shame work is ultimately that. It's this constant reevaluating of who am I. And I think, at least for me, I like things to be completed. I like things to have an end point. And what's really tricky and ironic about sort of specializing in shame resilience is that's not what happens. It is a lifelong pursuit of the next layer of shame. And sometimes it's going to hop to these big areas like talking about our bodies and weight and numbers and the reduction of self to that. And maybe each layer of that or each time you go through it, it's not as big or as intense, but there's no getting around it. I mean, I've been in recovery from my eating disorder for over 10 years and I still have body shame. I am actively always working on it. It's never going to go away. If I have a day that I like put something on and it fit me, even now where I know it's related to muscle gain as I've started different types of workouts and been doing it over a year. And I can see these changes in what I'm able to do, how strong I feel in my body. But now this piece of clothing doesn't fit me that quote unquote should.
Yes.
And I'm fucking spiraling and I forget all about how strong I feel and how much I love it. And I go right back to, we should probably start restricting and counting and doing all this stuff. And so yeah, I think just like realizing, you know, for both of us and the people that we help, there can be shame sometimes in this, I should have this resolved for me, but knowing that the beauty we can bring is to say, actually, that's not the goal. The goal is to increase our comfort in sitting with it rather than running, detaching, avoiding whatever it is that we've been doing up to this point.
It's like grief, right? You know, I think, I mean, you know more about this than like at least the psychology behind it, but it's like grief. If you lose someone or even not necessarily lose someone, transition, move countries, like whatever it may be, going from not being a mom to mom, going, you know, it's just, there's grief involved. And I think we think like, are you done grieving now? It's like, no, I'm never going to be done grieving. It's just going to look different. And so, because it meant something to you. So I think that that's similar with shame where it's like, no, I have to constantly be doing this work and unpacking.
I like that. That actually this morning, we'll listen to these different playlists and the Somewhere Over the Rainbow song, the original one, not the one that was done, or maybe it's not the original, but it's not the one from the movie. I forget the guy's name. I'll find it. I'll link it in the show notes. But basically, every time I hear that song, I think about my grandma who died a few years ago, and it played this morning. And Everly is like, are you thinking about your grandma? Are you sad? And just kind of checking in. I was like, gosh, today I don't feel that way. Some days I feel really sad. Some days I feel really, you know, whatever it is. Today I don't. Today I feel okay. And I think that what you said is the key point too. I mean, we see this with therapy. Oftentimes people wait to get any sort of support, whether it's therapy, coaching, any sort of healing, until they're like, I'm at my wit's end. I'm at my rock bottom. I can't do this anymore. And they'll often, and I used to see it in the therapy room all the time, stop coming when things start to feel a little bit better because we don't realize that talking about it, being open to it, processing it all the time, regardless of how we feel, is what gives us true healing and that sense of security and safety in ourselves to be able to handle it instead of saying, well, no, I only need help when things are really, really bad, or I only need to think about this when it's this way. And so, okay, let's think about this topic because when we decided we were going to talk about weight, scales, numbers, I mean, again, my brain was like a bunch of pop rocks and fireworks. Like, let's go here. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. But I'm thinking maybe just let's start with what is your relationship? How would you describe, like if you were writing a book about your relationship with your body over the years, how would you summarize it? What's it been like?
I started writing a book about this and I took a pause, but you know, I just think for me, it was centered something around like you're more than your weight. Like I just think what we've talked about where there is this tethering, there's this like attachment to these numbers. And I've seen that it's in multiple areas of my life. You talk about money and how much have I saved? How much have I spent? How much have I accomplished? All these things. And so, but I think the thing about weight is just that like people see it. and
Mm.
people sometimes think and comment on it too. Oh, you've lost weight. You look so great. Oh, you've gained weight.
Mhm.
Like, what's going on?
Mhm.
And so people always feel liberty to comment on your body. And you're like, who gave you permission to do that? Like, so I think for me, my relationship with my body has been one in different seasons where I'm trying to get approval around it. Whether someone's saying, like, it's almost like if I want them to say something or not say something, because that means I'm good,
Yeah.
right? Like this approval. And it didn't start out that way. I think when I started really taking care of my body and watching what I ate and exercising, it started out like, this is just fun. I started playing sports in high school. It was great. But when it got to a point where I was going through different things in my life, I wanted something to control, and I had gotten affirmation around my weight. I was like,
Mm.
okay, I can control this. It became more than about the weight. It became about like, I'm like trying to ground myself in, at least I got this. And so
Mm.
then when it spiraled outside of control and I went for the opposite end, like using food for comfort, it's like, that's where shame came in, because, oh, you had this, like you. So it's very much an
Mhm.
up and down relationship. Like, oh, I got this. I love how I look. Oh, no, I
Mhm.
don't. And so I need to fix it. So, and what you're saying, it changes based off of the day. It's like kids. I would
Yeah.
say my relationship, to summarize, is like my 4-year-old, where one minute she's like, oh yeah, this is great. I love eating this food. The next minute throws the food on the floor. Like, I
Yeah.
can't do this. And I'm just like, and they're just so full of emotion. They just say it how they feel. And I feel like that's how I've gotten. I'm just like, I don't like this. And I'm like, I don't know if that's
Mm.
bad, but I think for me, where it does become bad is where I go into this dark place of shame, where I, tell myself I don't belong, or like don't want to go somewhere because
Mm.
someone might see me larger or
Mhm.
whatever. That's when it becomes a problem, when I stop living my life because I'm afraid of however it will look. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a 4-year-old relationship with anything, is just up and down, up and down.
Well, and it's interesting because it sounds like prior to high school, I mean, obviously there's messages. We were receiving them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, now us watching our kids, we know that they're internalizing messages from the time that they're born about the world, their place in it, how to make sense of it. And we're just constantly trying to undo all the shit that ended up becoming problem stories for us, and expanding their thought beyond that and trying to
Mm-hmm.
create a different reality. But it sounds like you didn't have that sort of self-judgment, self-flagellation early on. You had a very neutral or positive, maybe even, relationship with your body. And then in high school, you're moving, you're enjoying that feeling, but then it started to be noticed. And my
Mm-hmm.
guess is prior to high school, you already had that sort of drive for success, drive for maybe
Yeah.
the metrics in a different way. You're
Right.
smart, you're high achieving, you're the good kid, whatever it is. So then someone starts commenting on this. Well, of course, even if they were subconscious, the messages about bodies and appearance are going to
Mm-hmm.
come out. And you're like, gosh, look I'm getting an A in this too. I
Right.
better keep that, because this is another form of security for my rank, my worth, my value. And
Mm-hmm.
so initially it sounds like it was less of a negative relationship with your body
Yeah.
and more a scarcity around, I can't lose this. And then
Mm-hmm.
the ebbing and flowing came from when you tried to control something that was never your business to control, which was
Right.
hunger, fullness, all these things, instead of listening to your body. And when you
Mm-hmm.
went up here, when you went in your head, things changed. And that experience of your body evolving, because you weren't listening to it, you were trying to control it, that's really where that negative and shame-based talk started to come into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah. And I mean, prior to high school too, I was around my mom and aunts a lot. And, we picked up Women's World, where all they talk about, like on one hand, someone lost 300 pounds and then someone
Right.
baked a chocolate cake. It's like, oh, this is confusing. But I don't think you're right. Like, and I went on, ate like how my mom ate, like I ate some Slim Fast or whatever. But it wasn't like, oh, this, it was just like, oh, we're eating healthy. It wasn't like, I got to do
Mm.
this because I need to like change. Maybe that's what people around me may have thought. And also it's this weird thing where over the last 8 years, I was like, no, we shouldn't pursue health for weight loss. I'm like, well, what if we want to? So it's coming to this place where it's like, how do I see that weight can be a tool to
Mm.
indicate that something is going on in my body? If I'm gaining weight and nothing's changed, something's going on. If I'm losing weight, nothing's changed,
Mm-hmm.
something's going on. But also if I want to lose weight because it makes me feel better, okay, but how do I start to detach it from that, like my worth is in it. I think that's been my goal postpartum with my kids, because I'm like, okay, I just don't feel as great carrying around some extra weight. So I'm like, yeah, I want to lose weight now, which I would have never said that like 5 years ago. Now I'm like, okay, but are you doing it because you don't actually, like, you don't want to accept your body at this weight? What if your weight never changed? Are you going to love yourself? It's like, I don't know. So it's like, okay, that's the deeper work. I mean, yeah, go ahead, Lou, but do some deeper work here. So I think that's always been my thing. Like, I like numbers. I do. I'm an achiever. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. So I like getting those things. But I think I can always, now I can tell. I can tell when it's like that scarcity, it pops up. I'm like anxious about it. That's when I'm like, this is no longer just for me. It's like, because I think I need to perform and be a certain way. So that's my key. Anxiety, which I would never say I was normally an anxious person, but I feel like I'm picking up. I'm like, oh, maybe you were all along, but you just had more time to like ignore it because you didn't have kids. Now you have to like have kids and you don't have any time to like do things to fix your shame. So you have to sit in it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to sit in it. But you're like, you got to sit in it.
I think it's interesting because so growing up, I had a lot of trauma. I didn't actually get diagnosed with PTSD until I was 31, maybe 32, right before I got pregnant with my daughter. And I was seeing therapists because I knew my history of my eating disorder. I was like, I just want to be mindful. I think I got this, but I know I'm going to gain weight. I know my body's going to change. I want to make sure I've got help on board ahead of time, you know, doing the thing that I would preach to everybody else to do. And I met with this psychiatrist first, and she gave me a PTSD diagnosis. I was like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like thinking back on childhood trauma, like I knew all these things. But one of the things that she talked about is I was like, how did this get missed for so long? Because like just the facts of my life, it's very clear that I went through trauma. Now, trauma doesn't necessarily mean someone has PTSD. Everybody responds differently. She's like, well, what happens a lot of the time, especially for women, just based on how they're socialized. I mean, you and I are in the US, so we can really only speak to that, is that our function is in the doing, the achieving, the excelling in very specific kind of meek, mild-mannered ways that are about sort of the good of everybody else. We deflect attention. We focus on, we need to excel, but not too much, but make sure that you've secured your place, but like take care of everybody else in the midst of that. And so a lot of the times, anxiety, PTSD, a lot of those ADHD, Asperger's, or now autism spectrum disorder can get lost because a lot of those things that are actually struggles for us, we cope with them in ways that actually looks better to the world around us. So you being a very high functioning, high achieving person, that might have all along been rooted to anxiety, a need to perform, a need to have control, a need for things to be a certain way, but it wasn't going to get seen because everyone else is like, well, fuck yeah, look at her. She's doing great. This is awesome. And so at least for me, that was a lot of the, I think, resentment I ended up having to work through was like, why the fuck didn't anybody ask a question? Because I would have been honest if they said, are you miserable? Like I didn't want that to be the reality. And now I feel like it's quote unquote too late to let it go. And so obviously we know that's not true. But one of the things that I think about is, you know, as we go through things and we're responding, oftentimes we're trying to control our environment because everything else feels, again, that scarcity, out of control, whatever it is. Our relationship with our body oftentimes feels like it is one of the biggest safety nets for how the world views us. And so nobody knew my mom was in prison, but they knew my body size by looking at me. Nobody knew that, you know, I didn't know who my dad was or any of these other elements. Nobody knew that I was on free and reduced lunch unless I told them, but they could look at my body and they could make an assumption about me right away. And it wasn't just weight. It was, I didn't know in high school. I know now I'm Iranian and that was even new. I only knew I was Middle Eastern until very recently. And then I found out that piece. And so I was like, well, I was really hairy. I had a unibrow. I had hairy legs. I got body hair for fucking days. And it is like a horse's tail thick all over. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Everybody can see that. And so I think it's a protective sort of layer because it's almost like a back, what's that? The back safe, whatever it is, like to make sure that if everything else gets fucked up, if you can't get the grades, if you can't achieve, you can't succeed, at least when somebody looks at you, they're still going to think of you a certain way. So when you talk about like not wanting to go out and go see people, my guess is that because their first assumption is going to be, I can't handle the rest of the things or something about me that I can't, it's too much of a threat if they think that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so good because I think you're right. Just like with our body. And I mean, there's other things too, like my hair, primarily I'm from the Caribbean. So it's curly and it's dry and it's large and in charge. And so a lot of us back in the day used to chemically relax our hair because straight hair is beautiful. Right. And straight hair is nice. And so had to go through even that process. So you're right. It wasn't just like my body and weight. It was like, it was, it can be the color of your skin. It can be the, the texture of your hair, how short your hair, how long your. And so as you're right, I think we're constantly, looking. And I just think for me, the greatest gift, this has been the heart, I think motherhood and having 2 kids has been the greatest gift, but the hardest thing, because I think all this stuff is coming to the surface.
Oh, heck yeah.
And I can't, and I'm like, it's like, I'm like, is all this new? Am I okay? I'm like, yeah, you're good. It's just like, you're just finally like, oh no, like, it's almost like all these things I found security in have been stripped away. Right. So like my weight I'm probably the heaviest I don't know if I've ever been. And it's not because I'm not doing all the things. It's just like my body is just also figuring out. I don't sleep much. So I'm trying to work on that. But all these different things. And like, I'm not like, doing as well in business as I imagine, but also don't know if I want to. So it's just trying to figure out what do I want and like all these different areas of my life. And it's like so good, but yet so hard that it's like I can't anchor myself in any of those. And it's been unsettling because it's like, who am I if I'm not a high achiever in things outside the home?
You literally jumped in my brain just now and you like said all the thing that I'm like trying to struggle with. And I want to pause on what you just said, because I think the thing that's so important is things were quote unquote fine. Doesn't mean that they were like, you felt good, everything was great, but you had a system down.
Right.
And then you had kids and your world expanded. And now suddenly, and this was a big part of my grief when I had Everly, was realizing I can never not give a shit about another person for the rest of my life.
Yes.
I always have to factor someone in. So now every fucking thing I do, I'm thinking about the effect it's going to have on my kid. And so when you do that, you're given this invitation to revisit things. You also see your kids at these ages that you can't help but revisit you at those ages. So you start to kind of think about these pieces. And it sounds like what happened is you wanted to go that next layer deep to really, because my guess is you're trying to communicate very openly, very direct with your kids, age appropriately, but to not have them develop this, my worth is in what I do. My worth is in how other people view me or my identities or whatever it is. But that means now you have to go back and go, okay, but am I okay with that? And what you just said, I think that's key. My husband just told me the other day, he's like, I think what you're struggling with is this idea of achievement and kind of success and reaching, but also being present in your life and being okay with where you're at. And so it's that same thing of like, should I be a different body size? Should I be more successful? I don't want people to think that I'm just his wife, that I'm just Everly's mom. I don't want people to think my business isn't, like, oh, just this little side thing, and it's realizing that I still have the hang up that my success is defined by the metrics of either how many people, whether that is, subscribers, purchasers, whatever it is, and how much money shows up on the fucking back end, which is crazy because I know for a fact you and I don't do this because of that. Success in our cognitive mind has nothing to do with that. But that reduction of our worth and value, other people are going to look at our one sheet and they're going to say, pass. Because she doesn't have this.
Yeah, I'm like, don't look at the bank account.
Right. Exactly.
But it's so funny. I feel like our husbands are our little therapists sometimes. And sometimes he's like, so, but you didn't do it for this reason. And he's like, so sometimes I'm like, I should just stop and be a mom, which by the way is a beautiful thing. And it's a hard thing. And he's like, you would be unhappy. You need to do this. But then also what you said about like being present and being successful, I think he was like, when I was having a really rough time, he was like, can you do both? Like, he's just asking me a question, like, can you be okay with doing both? If so, you just got to adjust what your expectations look like in both. And so And he's like, knowing me, he's like, can you do that? Because you want to be like 100% here and 100%, but can you do that? If so, we can continue as is. If not, we need to adjust something.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I can. And I'm like, can I? And so that's another journey that I'm on, like in everything, like, can I be okay with this other definition of maybe success that I'm like, is this actually my definition of success? Was it? Is it someone else's? Like just all these questions and
Yeah.
reflections that aren't easy questions. But as you said, going back to what you said with your kids, it's like, I wanted, in no way, shape, or form do I ever want my kids to feel like I only love them based on how they look or what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But I could
Mm-hmm.
even see as they get older, because when they're cute and cuddly, of course, they're love. And, we got to correct them. We got to discipline them. If I'm not careful, if I don't watch how I discipline or correct them
Mm-hmm.
and the restoration part, they're going to start making these same connections that I did that
Mm-hmm.
weren't good. Like, mommy loves me and is not angry when this happens. Okay, so
When
I'm
I
just going to
act
do
this
this.
way. Yeah.
Right. My kids don't care. Thank God. They're like, whatever, you're angry. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
They're like, mommy loves me. It's all good.
Yeah.
Good
Her
and bad.
emotional state is just like ours. It'll change. Give her time.
Exactly. My daughter's like, mommy, are you going to take some deep breaths? Take some deep breaths. I'm like, oh
Yep.
no, you're right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But
So,
it is that. And I think that is that connection you're having to your body too, where it's like, okay,
mhm.
part of that feeling too, I've got to do it 100%. Typically the goals aren't the problem as much as the scale and the timeline that is.
Oh yeah.
Like
Good point.
we don't know. I mean, I feel like, so Everly is almost 4.5 years old at the time we're recording this. I feel like my body is just starting to turn back on communication with me in different ways. Like for the longest time, even just little things like my breasts were not mine. They were milk sacks. Like I couldn't experience them as anything else other than that. It's like seeing them in a dress, seeing my body, seeing curves. I was like, no, you're a mom. You are not supposed to feel that way. So like different evolutions of even seeing my body now with this added identity, but still its own body has been interesting. And you ask that, like, can I be okay if this is my body size? Can I be okay if this is where my body's norm is now? I mean, I think the question is, what am I telling myself it would mean if this was the number my body was at? If this was the size clothing that I'm in? What is the story that I have internalized about this size? Because that question of can I be okay? Like you can work to that, but you can't actually get to that until you've decided, okay, but what's the fear? What does that mean about me? What does it say? For me, when I think about it, I was always perceived a certain way. Like I remember going into a store and two of the people that worked there being like, I love playing dress up with you. You're like a tiny little doll. And that feedback of like, oh, I'm so small, they need clothes on me was like, I'm beautiful to them. People notice me. There's a level that feels like I'm above other people. And I fucking hate saying that out loud because nobody wants to admit they want to be better. But on some level, we all are striving because we've been conditioned to climb.
Come on. We all want to be
social
better.
ladders, right? Like there's that piece. And so it's the same now. If somebody comments on me as a mom, if somebody comments on me as a YouTube video or the podcast, like you feel that. And so then the question is, what would you lose or what are you afraid would happen if your body's that? And so I don't know if that's coming up for you, but when you think about it, like what's the biggest fear if this was your body and you maintained the healthy lifestyle that you've designed that feels good for you and this is where your body feels healthiest? Then what?
Yeah. This is a good question. It's interesting because I think as you were talking, I realized I want to dictate people's perception of me, which we actually can never do, right?
You mean we can't? What?
We can't, but I want to control that. I want to control that perception. I want to control the narrative. But it's interesting because I do feel like when I have a 4 and 2-year-old and my 2-year-old, to me, like he turned 2 this summer and it's like, I feel like at 2, I'm like, oh, okay, I can finally like breathe again and get back into things. But what's interesting, after he stopped breastfeeding a year ago on his own, I noticed that's when my weight changed. And obviously there's so many hormones going
Yeah.
on. And I didn't even notice it was happening till it like fully happened. And it's not that I stopped exercising.
Uh-huh.
It's not that I stopped like eating well. Yeah, maybe some days I didn't eat the greatest, but I've been really intentional with it recently. And I've, similar to you, felt stronger. I felt more like healthier than I have in a long time. And I've had to ask myself, like, are you okay with that number? And I'm like, no, I'm not. This is the heaviest I've been. Like, no, I'm not. Because why? Because I'm like, oh, Brianna, you're a health coach. Like, you should be better. You shouldn't. And all this foolishness that we believe. And so, and then I'm like, okay, well, then why? Similar to what you just asked me. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think it's because I had experiences in the past where I controlled things, where I was accepted in a certain way. But it's just crazy because everyone who really loves me and knows me doesn't care. It's all me, you know? And so, I don't know. I'm working on it. I haven't arrived like this postpartum mom body because I want more kids too. And I was like telling my husband, I was going to say between you and I, but we're on a podcast, so it's not between you and I.
It feels like it in the moment. It's fine.
I know. I'm like, oh no, I do want to get healthy and feel good in my body. But part of me is like, I want to be a certain weight because I know I gain weight when you're pregnant. So I don't want to be, but I'm like, what if what if it doesn't happen in the time that we want to get pregnant? Am I okay with that? Am I okay being with just a little bit heavier pregnant? I'm like, oh, I don't know. But at the same time, I'm like, if I wait, I'm never going to have another baby. Because to me, all this to say, whenever I've gone on a healthy journey and it has involved with eventually wanting to lose weight, it has not happened quick. It has always been sustainable and it's always been enjoyable. But the times where I'm like trying to do it quick, it always comes back to bite me. And so I'm at war with myself often. I want to do it quick because I want to really, why do I want to do it quick? I want to get rid of the shame.
Yeah.
That's why I want to do it quick.
Yeah.
I want to get rid of the shame. Similar with like debt. I want to get rid of the debt. I don't want no one to know, but it's like, sometimes I was journaling on this week. I'm actually grateful that it's all slow because it allows me to sit in it and do the deeper work of detaching myself from that and knowing that my value or worth isn't in what I did and didn't do. But man, does it hurt. Man, is it painful. And so I don't know. It's like I'm coming to the point where I am okay if it doesn't change, but I'm not quite there yet.
Well, and is it in your mind? Because I'm assuming, do you use a scale?
Once every now and then. That's the thing. I try not to go on it often. So when I do, and I'm like, oh, wait.
Well, and so you also have this, I mean, I think scales are either you have to use them all the time or use them never at all. And because otherwise you're just like, I mean, you're shooting fish in a barrel and you're like, I don't know what's in there right now. It's the middle of the night and I can't see anything. And so you don't know like all the different factors that are going on and why your weight might be up, why it's not. And so I'm sure there's a general trend that's happened because our bodies have gone through these major shifts and changes and we had humans in them and now we don't. And our body's like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And we're getting older. And unfortunately and fortunately, we have a lot of information around how our hormones being in a female body will show up and change. Like some of what I've experienced, or I'm like, I feel like I'm holding weight more in these spots that I didn't used to hold weight, or I feel like these things are different. My experience of bloating even feels different. And how periods feel in my body feels different. Like a lot of that is hormones. It is not just postpartum, but like pre-menopause stuff that starts happening. And so it's like, you also know, I can't control the fact that I'm going to get older and my life circumstances are going to constantly be evolving, whether it is mental, emotional pain, physical changes, whatever it is, my body is constantly going to be in a state of adapting to the world around it. And sometimes the body's form of protection or the way that it manages things is it drops weight. Sometimes it gains weight. It holds on to things. Now that can be an indicator of, like you said, it's information, it's data.
Yes.
But how quickly when you get on the scale every once in a while, it sounds like the data you're using it for is you're fucking up. You're gaining weight. And it's all the negative stories. You're getting fat. You're gross. People aren't going to want to, no one's going to hire a fat fitness coach. Those stories that people say when and nobody wants to admit that out loud. It's the same way that I used to feel in the eating disorder realm, like working with people with eating disorders and having a body and being like, what assumptions are they making about me and my body right now? And wondering what thoughts they had if I ate something during meal times with them or what that looked like. And it's like, I mean, we could have a whole separate conversation around reclaiming the word fat and reclaiming body sizes and what that would look like. But the reality is we're all fat phobic on some level because we all grew up hearing the same things. We grew up in a culture that said that. And so the automatic assumption that you have, especially scarcity around business success, is going to be, if I can't control that, no one's going to hire me. No one's going to want to work with me. No one's going to take me serious. And now the bank account's going to keep reflecting this. And then this is going to be a problem. So it's not just, I don't love my body. It's my body is also a representation of these other things that I also feel like I can't get a handle on. And your brain can't use that data neutrally anymore. It only uses that data punitively. And that's exhausting.
Yeah. I love how you said that. Like, was going through this program, this business program, and the woman got certified by Brooke from the life coach school, and she leads you through this different model. And this starts with the data, just like a fact. And she then, leads you through like, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, and reality about it. And she's like 100% where most of us fall down and just trip ourselves up is what the meaning we are attaching to that fact. And so what you're saying, it's like, okay, this is a number. What's it telling me? What's it saying? It's like, oh, maybe you're getting older. And so it's not as easy. You maybe shouldn't have that extra thing right there and there. You got to monitor that a little bit. Versus like me, I'm like, I don't want anyone to tell me what I can and cannot eat. Like, no, like, but at the same time, I'm like, probably should listen a little bit. So I think that's it. It's just like the meaning. And if left to our own devices, I think this is the power of therapy, the power of coaching, the power of being vulnerability, power of like the shame resilience work is that when we voice it and either other people or even ourselves are able to listen to it, we're like, what is that? Like, why are we saying that? Why are we thinking that? I honestly ask myself, would I want my daughter to say this back to me or think this about herself? Absolutely not. So why am I saying this to myself? Why did the rules to her not like it, they should have same apply? We're both human beings. Yeah, I'm an adult. I know a little bit better in some cases, but there's grace for me too. So I think the meaning that I attach to that, whether that's numbers, talk about numbers in whatever area of my life, it's just like numbers, because I've used numbers my whole life as a grounding place of like, are you hitting this? Are you achieving? And sometimes not even for other people, just for myself, like, so that I can accept myself versus them just accepting me. And so what's it like to not do that? That's scary, right? Because those things that we've attached ourselves to, it was grounding in maybe it served us at one point, but now if it doesn't, it's like, is there another way?
Yeah.
And am I willing to pursue that other way? Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah, it was interesting as you were saying that. I was like, well, what's my fear? What am I attaching? What's the meaning I'm attaching? And I don't think I've said this out loud before, but I'm pretty sure the biggest fear I have is that I'm going to be average, that I am not going to be special. And I believe that everybody is unique, that everybody is special in their own way. But it's the same feeling I had. I was doing my master's program. I think it was my last semester. It was the last year, but I don't remember if it was the fall or the spring. And my supervisor and I were talking about my reality about, I'd had a review at one of my internship sites, and it was like a glowing review. Glowing, absolutely wonderful. Except she goes, you could do a little bit better at sitting in emotions with your clients, because my big thing was like, emotions are messy and they get in the way. Like, do the fucking work, like like move forward. And that's what I was kind of conditioned to do in my own anxious brain, and kind of that, like, just be a performer, produce, move on. And so I got this feedback. Obviously it hit on levels I wasn't totally aware of. There was some personal components to it. But I had called my husband right after that and was like, I'm a terrible therapist. They're going to kick me out of the program. Like, literally like 5 stars across the board. But this one piece of feedback just tanked me. And so then I'm talking with my supervisor, And we kind of like narrow in on this more of like, so much of my worth is in, and I think a lot of it for me is this idea of I've faced adversity and it'd be easy for people to see me a certain way. I don't want that. I don't want anyone to think I couldn't excel. I'm not resilient. And I think that's a defense for sure. But she's like, what if you just didn't turn in the last assignment for my class? What if you just got a B? Like, you have an A right now. What if you didn't turn in the last assignment and you let yourself get a B? And I kid you not, I almost had a fucking panic attack in her room. Like, I can't do that.
So willingly getting a B? Absolutely not.
I cannot do that. I got one non-A in college and I lost my shit for months. So I cannot do that. And so then it was like, you know, she's pushing me and she's pushing me. And I was like, I can't have that. She's like, who is ever going to know? Who's ever, like, when you go in, have you ever asked your therapist? Have you ever asked your doctor for their grades? Do you need to know their GPA to know if they're good? I'm like, God, no, but that's not me. And there's that feeling of, like you said, I want the same thing. I want my daughter to have an experience I didn't have. And I want to heal my own inner child so I can have that experience now. But I still play under a different rule book. And it's really fucking hard. It's really scary to throw those rules out because the reason I had them felt so instinctively protective against rejection, against judgment, against failure in some way. And so I haven't yet accepted that actually average is wonderful. Like actually what an average being a subjective interpretation. For me, it would be just allowing myself to not always have to be achieving, to have the house that's messy and to not do the dishes one night because you know what? I'm fucking tired. Instead of having the perfectly clean house or the perfectly organized X or, you know, whatever it is. And so I think there's this piece of having to start to sit with, I'm still in some way attaching it to a version of me that feels the instinct to protect, to make sure that I am defended at all costs. And I don't need to be in that place anymore. I have love and security and support, same as you. And so there's something for you now of needing to relinquish that feeling. And you have littles. I mean, Everly's 4.5 and I just feel like I'm starting to breathe. So 2 does not feel like a breather yet. That feels like an intermission.
Yeah, my 4-year-old feels like a breath in a way.
2 is an intermission before.
She's a teenager in her heart.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I know. All 4 to 6-year-old girls, and then they just get worse. And in the best way possible. I love my daughter so much, but fuck, is it hard. So I just think like now I think your instincts are up, your vigilance is up because you're a mom. But I think because there's still that stickiness, you're attaching it to the wrong defenses and protection. So the vigilance you have about weight, identity, people's perception of you, it's getting in the way of you being that defender of inclusion, of love and acceptance the way that you really want to be for your kids. And in turn for the inner child versions of you that have been waiting for that same piece.
Yeah. So good. It's interesting you say that inner child too, and just wanting to live like, you know, we're going to start like a homeschool preschool with my daughter, and she's just good. She just loves that sort of stuff. And it's interesting being more intentional with the experiences that we're crafting for her and the values we're setting for her and our household. And it's so cool. I feel like when I started to like embrace that and kind of let go of the need to achieve in these other areas. And I have to watch it because I can try to achieve in this area too. And just like enjoy it. And reading this book about like wonder in learning and wonder in life, I was like, I'm ready to live again. Like I'm ready to get back to wonder. And I feel like I've just lost that. And so I feel like our kids have so much to teach us about shame, about lack of shame, actually, and just like being who they authentically are. And you know, I just feel like it's as hard because her personality is very different than mine, or maybe it's very alike, and that's why we clash. I just feel like it's teaching me a lot about it. It's allowing me to live again as that inner child and coming to a place where I don't need to do, and like they don't love me because I like make them breakfast or put on their clothes. Like they love me for me, and I love them for them. And so, yeah, I think kids have a lot to teach us about shame too.
Yeah, I think even as you said that, I thought about, okay, so would you tell your 4-year-old, I would only love you if you were wearing 4T clothes? Like you're growing too fast. You're in a 5T. You're in a 6, 7. That's not okay. You're, you know, you're lazy. You're doing that. And then like just the thought of even saying that out loud to like a 4-year-old is like, makes me want to throw up a little bit. Like it's so uncomfortable, but it's okay. So then what about when she's 10? What about when she's 15? You should be in this size. You're not. What about when she's 25? And it's like, okay, so then when is the point that crosses over where now she's got to follow the same rules because her body is going to be out in the world. And I think it doesn't make our internal stories easier. Like I will tell her she can get a B. I still don't know if I could go back and do it. Like, I don't know. I want to say I could, but I don't think so, if I'm being honest. And so I think that's the power of, okay, so where's the line then? Where does she then get to start talking to herself that way? Where does the rule book come to her? And if the reality is we don't ever want her to have the rule book, the only way that we can model that is if we take it off for ourselves too. And so you make eating something fun to explore, even if it is like, it's not, we're having the Slim Fast shake, because on some level you knew like that's a weight loss. That's a diet thing. Someone's got to change their shape.
It's good though. It was really sweet. I'm like, you sure this is for?
Yeah, right. Are you positive you didn't put something else in this? Yeah. But it is like, okay, so how do you teach them the same way that we want to know? Like the same, when I talk to her about all foods fit, I fucking love cake and ice cream. I also know that if I only eat cake and ice cream, I'll feel sick. My body won't be able to do what I want to do. And I love going out and playing too much to give that up. I also know that if I only ate salads and apples, I'd feel sick. I love playing outside and doing fun things too much to do that. So it's realizing, how do we create wonder in, I wonder what this feels like in my body. I wonder what this body at this age and this size can and is interested in doing and how it wants to show up. And sure, maybe, I gave up snacking after she went to bed because sometimes I was doing it just to pass time. It was the rejection of going to sleep when I'm tired. I'm going to watch my shows and eat the treats I want to eat because nobody's around. That's not healthy for anything, sleep, food, any of that. That was a change that felt good to me. I wonder how much better I could feel. But when she wants to go get ice cream and I'm feeling fat in my body and like I had to change my clothes because my shorts were too tight, I'm still getting ice cream with her because she's allowed to be excited to go get ice cream with her mom. And there's a difference in that.
Right. So good. Man. Yeah, I think if you have kids or not, I think these are just such great things. Like it's just a challenge. Like I think we've accepted so many things around numbers, around weight, and around our body. And if you're not careful because of our access to information and access to people's experience, people's bodies via, post on Instagram or whatever, that's when we start to allow these things to enter us in. So I think that this is the good work. It's challenging ourselves to be like, all right, that's cool. Like, do I want to believe that? Do I want to feel that way? And if not, we got to like do that work because it's just necessary. And because you're right. Like I just see if I don't get healthy fully all around, it definitely spills over into my mothering, into my marriage, into my relationships. And I think before I never thought that. I'm like, it's fine. It's my issue. No, it's not. Like you're saying I have to always think about other human beings, like 3, husband, kids. And if we have more that, and it's like, okay, but that's an honor. It's a privilege, but it's a responsibility. And so it doesn't just affect me anymore. And so I got to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that I've accepted just in life in general is that the only thing I'm sure of is that I am not really sure of anything. Like, I know I love the people that I love in my life and I feel safe and I know what that feels like now. But I don't know if what I'm doing is right. Like 98% of what, and I tell my daughter that all the time. I don't know if this is the right way to handle this. We're in a developmental leap and I am figuring it out the same as you. Like we're just trying something and it might not stick. And I think it's the same with, when we think about numbers, like when we get so reductive, Seth Godin talked about this at one of his books. I can't remember when, but basically talked about, he's been writing a blog post every day for, I don't remember how many years it is now. And he's like, I used to have this thought that everyone had to be better than the next. Well, I've written thousands of blog posts. Most of them are average. By nature of the math and numbers, they're all average, except for the worst and the best. And so kind of thinking about that of like, so what do? You never write until it's going to be better than the one before that. You never go do something or experience something. And I think that whether it's the number on the scale, it's the number of followers that we have, it's the money in the bank account, I think it's coming back to that idea of I can understand when I am leaning into authenticity with my body, when it feels good. And I know what it was like to be a significantly lower weight in my eating disorder. And I know what it would take to get back there. And I know that didn't feel good and it didn't feel authentic and I didn't feel safe. And when I think about trying to grow the business, I could make a lot more money doing things that don't feel good to me.
Right.
And I know that, but I don't want that. And so I think it's coming back to every time that comes in of like, oh, but you should be doing X, you should be this. It's recognizing it's an invitation to try to make us conform to that reductive way of measuring people. It's the social ladder system internalized. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of that anymore. And so I think sounds like the next step for both of us is to just keep asking those questions and to add in that state of wonder without judgment. And what would it look like if we could be open to kids, whether your body is heavier or smaller than it is now, and to trust that the most important thing is that you are in a state of safety and security and oneness with your body to have the safest, healthiest pregnancy you could have. Starting your weight higher or lower doesn't necessarily mean that, but if your behaviors are such that you are, not doing those healthy things, it will.
Right. Yeah. It's so good. I just, there's this journal I sometimes reflect on. At the end of the day, some good points from the day, what progress you're making. And the last one is like, I love blank about me. I love this about me. You're supposed to write it and say it. And every single night I'm like, I don't want to do this one. I don't want to do this one. And it's so good because I do it and I'm like, it's a direct offense against these things, right? Where it's like, because at the end of the day, I think shame, it's about our body. It's about, this, but it's about ourselves. And so when we can directly say, I love my curves, or I love like my curly hair, or I love that I'm resilient. I love that I'm a mess. I love whatever. It's like, I love that about me. It's just it's just us starting to come back to where, it helps me fight shame by saying, no, I'm pretty awesome. So I'm going to choose to love myself in this moment. And it's such a good way to end the day because then you go to bed feeling good about yourself versus like looking at all the dishes that aren't washed, looking at all the things. It's like, no, I did this at least, or I love this about me, not necessarily what I did.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even just sometimes for people when they're like, but it's hard to say that because what if I don't believe it? Even just acknowledging I love that I don't have to love every part of myself to be worthy of being loved.
Yes.
And like even that sort of reframe of like, you got one watering can, you can't water everything and be perfect. Like you said, you can't do everything 100% all the time. And so instead going, what feels most right to me? And, I think at the end of it, it's metrics are a direct opposition to values driven living. And so, even thinking back to school, I did get all the A's. I got the grades. I never learned how to learn. I learned how to produce. And if I go to my values, gosh, I think learning is so cool. I think exploring is one of the best possible things we can do. Like you now thinking about this for your daughter with the wonder, but I didn't have that. And so if I actually go and like anchor down to what was the value was perfection, performance, and conformity. Those actually aren't things I value. And so when I can get to that place, it's never going to feel easy. Not getting on the scale, not using those numbers to define things. It's never going to feel easy because you're always going to have what ifs. That's literally anxiety. There's no actual rationale. Your brain just stays in the what ifs and it plays that game 24/7. Yeah, you're right. What if you never weighed yourself again and you gain an infinite amount of weight and you get incredibly unhealthy? Okay, what if? But what if you stopped weighing yourself and you took off some of the stress and you stopped dumping cortisol in your body because you're constantly fucking shitting on yourself for what you look like.
Cortisol.
And you actually shift your weight. So it's all of this. Okay. I mean, we knew going into this, we knew this the first time we talked, we could talk for hours. And I think we have such a similar
part 2, 3, 4,
yeah,
5,
right.
6.
And here we go.
Yes.
I want to know, I want you to think about you listening to this again in 6 months. And that version of you is holding out her hand and saying, I need a little something. I'm having a hard time with this. Shame's been on my door every day. I need someone to help me. What do you want to tell that Bri when she needs something from you?
You know, it's interesting. I was talking with someone else the other day and I got down to the core, like, what's a value? Talking about values. And I'm like, well, I think at the core, I want to love and be loved. Like, that's just what I want to do. I want to love deeply and be loved deeply. And so I would tell her, like, you're loved deeply and you do love deeply. Even though you think you don't, you do. And so sit in that, rest in that, be assured in that.
I love that. I love that. And just, it's that idea of kind of giving ourselves the security that we've been conditioned to seek outside of us. But in reality, we can give it to ourselves in a way that really does make us feel safe and helps kind of turn down the dial on shame. All right. I love this. Before we go, there are going to be people listening to this that are like, okay, how do I find Bri? I want to know more about what she's doing. I want to follow her journey, or I want her to support me in mine. I want to walk alongside it together. Where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Brianna.Wilkerson. I'm on Facebook a lot these days. So just look me up, Brianna Wilkerson, or my Facebook group, the Mommy Me Time Community.
I love it. I love it so much. I will make sure that all those links are down in the show notes. Again, I appreciate you so much. And listeners, just like we do with every episode, I want you to be kind to yourself and say, what's one thing I can take from this episode today? One thought, one question, one reflection, one shift. We're not trying to do it all. Like we were talking about, we're doing this work deeply for years and we're still unraveling. We're still taking those pieces in. And so just being really kind to yourself of what's one thing I can walk away with today, and how can I show myself love again, even if I don't love every part of myself. And of course, you can comment below. Let us know what's coming up for you. If you want Bri back again and we've got specific topics you want to dive into, let me know. And that way we can put something together. I'd love to hear it. Thank you all so much for being here. And I will see you next Sunday.